They thought I'd never leave. For 6 years, I smiled through their lies, built their dreams, and let them steal my credit. When I finally handed in my resignation, my boss looked at me like I'd just told a joke. He said nothing. So I decided to answer his silence with a plan. Before I tell you how that silent office turned to screaming and panic in one morning, hit that like button if you've ever been undervalued at work. This one's for anyone who kept their cool long enough to make karma clock in on time. I used to believe in evergreen conservation initiative. 6 years ago, I walked into that building thinking I'd found my place. People protecting forests, fighting pollution, saving wildlife. The office smelled of old paper, fresh coffee, and that faint, earthy scent from the potted ferns in every corner. I thought, this is where I'll do something good. Reginald, my boss, was the face of the organization. Crisp suits, booming voice, practiced charm. To outsiders, he looked like a leader. Inside the office, we knew better. He led like a puppet master, pulling strings, taking credit, shifting blame. And I was his favorite puppet. My title was Project Development Coordinator, which was just fancy talk for do everything no one else wants to. I wrote grants, managed reports, met donors, built partnerships, half of which Reginald would later claim as his personal vision. The first time it happened, he apologized. "Oh, Anita," he said, smiling wide enough for the donors to see his perfect teeth, "I must have forgotten to mention your name. You know how it goes. Team effort." I laughed it off. Back then, I believed him. Within a year, I was doing 80-hour weeks. Every report that came from my desk got his signature. Every success meeting opened with his bragging. My leadership has brought in record funding. And each time I tried to speak, his eyes told me, don't. You learn to read eyes in offices like that. Fear in the analysts, exhaustion in admin, that sad acceptance in long-timers who'd stopped believing things could change. Still, I told myself the work mattered more than the credit. I clung to the mission. Then things started to rot. It began small. Reginald asked me to adjust numbers for a grant proposal. Nothing crazy, he said, just make it look like our results lean greener than they actually are. Donors love upward trends. I hesitated. But that's falsifying. He laughed, a deep, confident laugh. It's just presentation, Anita. Every nonprofit does it. He looked around the office, lowered his voice, and leaned in close. You want this place to survive, right? So do I. I adjusted. Once. Then twice. The little changes turned into regular edits, then entire rewrites. Every time I tried to raise a concern, Reginald found a way to make me doubt myself. You're overthinking. This is how the real world works. Don't be naive. Naive. His favorite word. It stung worse than an insult. He used it to make honesty sound like weakness. By the end of the 4th year, we were swimming in numbers I no longer trusted. The awards we won were built on fiction. The glossy reports on our website, those were my words too, twisted by Reginald's demands. And the worst part? He was rewarded for it. Speaking panels, news interviews, new funding rounds. He looked like a hero. Meanwhile, I was the silent ghost writing his legend. The turning point came one afternoon after I'd worked through lunch again, and Reginald called me into his office. His door had this way of closing too softly, like it didn't want to wake anyone from the illusion that everything was fine. He handed me another file. We need to show a 10% increase in our urban restoration data. These plots, the ones in the Riverside district, make them look finished. I shook my head. They're not finished. We planted half the saplings. The report isn't ready. He smiled, that politician's smile that made my spine tense. Then make it look ready. I placed the file back on his desk. If the donors ask questions, he interrupted. You're good with words. My pulse thudded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Something inside me cracked that day. I didn't raise my voice, but I walked out without saying another word. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m, remembering every moment I'd swallowed my pride for the sake of team spirit. Every time I'd chosen silence over conflict. The next morning, when I folded my resignation letter and placed it on his desk, I actually felt alive again. He didn't even look at it.
Anita, come on. He waved a dismissive hand as he typed on his laptop. You're tired. Take the weekend off. We'll talk Monday. No, this is official, I said. I've given everything I can. I'm done. He kept typing. Noted, he mumbled, never meeting my eyes. I left, certain he'd process it. Monday came. Nothing. No reply, no HR email, no exit forms, just piles of new work on my desk. I checked the company calendar and saw my name still listed for 3 new projects. I knocked on HR's door. Hi, I submitted my resignation last week. The HR manager blinked in confusion. Resignation? I haven't received anything from Reginald. He hadn't submitted it. I walked straight to his office again, anger fluttering in my chest like a trapped bird. Reginald, you didn't forward my letter. He looked up calmly. Because you're not quitting. Excuse me? He leaned back in his leather chair. You're emotional right now. We have deadlines. You're too valuable to lose. So let's just forget this little episode, all right? He spoke like he was doing me a favor. Reginald, that's not your decision. He smiled, slow, smug, effortless. It is, actually. Until HR has formal notice through the system, you're still our employee. And with that, he went back to typing. I stood frozen, breathing hard, realizing this man truly believed he owned me. 6 weeks. 6 endless weeks followed. He ignored every reminder, every email. Staff whispered that I'd changed my mind. Donors still asked for me directly, thinking I was content. Reginald had effectively erased my right to leave by pretending not to hear me. At first, I tried to fight it. I called HR again, sent physical letters. He intercepted them. When I showed frustration, he laughed in team meetings. Don't mind Anita, she's just a bit overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. That word became my prison. I went home every night exhausted, numb, angry, and small, but under that anger, a new feeling grew. Something focused, cold, and silent. If he wanted silence, I would give him silence, but mine would be the kind that destroys. Late one night, after yet another ignored email, I stared at the glowing computer screen and whispered aloud, "All right, Reginald, you don't want to hear me quit. You'll sure hear me finish."
I woke up the next morning feeling like someone had turned off the background noise in my head. No tears, no shaking, no shouting, just empty calm. That's how I knew something in me had changed. I wasn't going to beg this man for permission to leave anymore. I was going to prepare. Still, the days crawled by like slow punishment. Every morning, I'd walk into that building feeling the walls whisper, "You don't belong here." The fluorescent lights mixed with the smell of burnt coffee and heavy printer toner, it all pressed down on me. I started counting the seconds I could hold my breath, pretending I was underwater, seeing how long I could last until escape. Reginald kept up his daily performance. He'd stand by the reception area, shaking hands with visitors, pretending to mentor the staff. "Anita here is one of our finest," he'd say, smiling at me thinly. "Couldn't do it without her." Inside, I burned. He wasn't proud of me, he was claiming ownership of the work again. Around the office, people noticed my quietness. Carla, the project analyst, leaned over my cubicle one day and whispered, "You all right? You look like you're planning something." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." She laughed nervously, then looked around before whispering, "He's been telling people you'll be leading the new donor outreach. He said you signed a contract extension." That was it, the solid proof he was now lying outright. And everyone believed him because fighting back against Reginald was suicide for your career. Each week, he gave me extra work as if to remind me I was his. Tasks appeared on my desk with little sticky notes, his perfect handwriting marking deadlines so tight they were impossible. When I mentioned the workload, he said, "That's what happens when people try to play martyr instead of team player." I went home, opened my laptop, and started keeping records. Every fake number, every doctored report, every instruction to adjust results. I backed everything up, offsite drives, cloud folders under harmless labels, even printed copies stored in my hallway closet behind old hiking boots. You know those moments when your anger gets quiet, so quiet it becomes precision? That's where I lived for those 6 weeks. While I kept working during the day, I rebuilt in secret at night. I located original field data from our field partners, real numbers, showing just how bad the lying had become. Then I compared them to the polished figures in Evergreen's latest public report. The gap was enough to sink the organization overnight. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Evergreen wasn't just exaggerating, it was outright deceiving donors, claiming completed projects that didn't exist, reporting fiction as conservation success. It wasn't saving the planet, it was putting on a green-colored magic show. Then came the incident that broke whatever fragile respect I still had left for that place. We were preparing for a site visit from major donor corporate donors, people whose money basically kept Evergreen alive. Reginald gathered us all in the main room, standing beside a slideshow full of bright photos. "All right, team," he said, voice rich with fake warmth. "Our numbers look fantastic. The field team in Riverside did great. Anita, the data you sent was perfect." I stared at the screen. Those weren't my numbers. He'd changed them again, only this time he'd added graphs marked "Final verified data by A. Lopez." My name. My reputation. After the meeting, I cornered him in the hallway. "Reginald, those numbers aren't mine. You replaced the real data." He gave a small shrug. "They're close enough. Donors don't need the gritty details. That's fraud." He smirked. "Big word, Anita. Calm down before someone hears." That smirk lit a fuse in me. My voice stayed calm somehow, but I felt ice crawl through my chest. "You shouldn't have signed my name." "He signs everyone's name when needed. That's leadership," he said, turning to leave. That night, for the first time, I didn't cry, I smiled. Because the moment he faked my name, he gave me all I needed. Proof of misconduct tied directly to him. Those next weeks stretched thin as wire. I went to work, did my tasks, nodded at everyone's small talk, but my mind stayed locked on the growing folder in my laptop titled Quiet Days. Inside it lived hundreds of emails, drafts, screenshots, originals. Every lie under his name. Still, keeping the secret weighed heavy. You can't tell anyone you're quietly collecting evidence. It makes you a target. Carla sometimes asked if I was okay. I kept saying I was just tired. The truth was simpler. I was both terrified and thrilled. I knew that one wrong step could mean Reginald discovering my plan, firing me before I could act, and burying everything.
At night, I'd sit on the edge of my bed, laptop open, and whisper to myself like a mantra, "Stay quiet, stay calm. He doesn't get to win forever." Sleep came in scraps. I'd wake from dreams where he walked into my apartment, stealing the files, laughing as everything vanished. But every morning I'd open my folders again, checking each piece of evidence like counting prayers. One Friday, he almost caught me. I was copying some old audits off the shared drive when his reflection appeared in my computer screen behind me. My hands froze. "Working late again?" he asked. "Just clearing backlog," I said, keeping my voice steady. He stared at the screen for a second too long. I turned the monitor slightly away. "Ever the devoted one?" he said. Then quietly, too quietly, "I hope you're not trying to stir trouble, Anita. You wouldn't want to ruin all you've built here." He smiled. Then he walked off,
his footsteps echoing in the half-empty office. My whole body trembled once he was gone. That night, I packed the last of my files and moved my entire set of evidence to a private email draft, hidden, encrypted, ready. He'd actually given me an extra reason to work faster. Fear transformed into energy. By the end of week 6, Reginald had fully convinced himself he'd beaten me down again. During a Monday meeting, he made jokes about staff loyalty while standing right beside me, like humiliating people was sport. I smiled the entire time, because I'd already scheduled an email for Friday, 9 a.m., to go out to the board of directors, the main donors, and a few journalists who covered environmental grants. Attached were all the files showing years of lies, data manipulation, and self-signed reports. And for good measure, I typed a calm cover note. Dear board members, as my 6 weeks notice expires today, I believe it's my duty to leave you with clarity about the organization's reporting practices. Attached are verifiable records showing repeated misrepresentation of donor outcomes by Executive Director Reginald Harper. My intention isn't destruction, but accountability. Sincerely, Anita Lopez. Reading it gave me chills. I didn't gloat, didn't threaten. I just told the truth and pressed schedule. For the next 3 days, every time Reginald bragged or laughed, I had to stop myself from smiling. By Thursday night, I actually slept peacefully for the first time in months, only the calm before impact. Friday morning, I walked into the office at 8:30, coffee in hand, looking like any other tired employee. People greeted me. No one noticed my slightly shaking fingers. I sat at my desk, powered on my computer, and at 9 a.m., the silent clock in my head struck. Somewhere deep in the system, my email flew out into the world. I didn't check to confirm. I just waited. At 9:07, the first sound came. Reginald's door slamming open. "What the hell is this?" His voice thundered down the hallway. Heads popped up from cubicles. The quiet morning turned wild in seconds. He stormed across the office holding printed sheets, eyes blazing. "Everyone, stop what you're doing right now." I stayed still, heart pounding, finally ready to face the chaos I'd been building. For a long heartbeat, no one moved. The entire office froze as Reginald's voice echoed across the floor. It wasn't the smooth tone everyone was used to. This was raw panic, cracked, loud, desperate. He stood in the middle of the open space, waving a printout of my email. "Who leaked this?" he shouted. "Who has access to these records?" People exchanged confused glances. No one answered because everyone knew I'd written those reports. They could all connect the dots without me saying a word. I looked up from my desk slowly. "Are you talking about my resignation email?" I asked, calm as still water. He turned his furious eyes on me. You can't just accuse me of falsification. Do you have any idea what this could do?" I shrugged slightly. "Yes, that's why I sent it." Someone near the back actually gasped. It was probably Mia, the new intern who'd only been there 2 weeks. Poor thing didn't realize she'd just witnessed the beginning of his downfall. Reginald's voice dropped, trembling with anger. "You've ruined everything we worked for." "No," I said quietly. "You ruined it the moment you faked my signature." That landed like a slap. He opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, his phone started ringing. Then another phone. Then the office line. Then the building phone. Within 5 minutes, Evergreen's walls had become a storm of ringing, buzzing, panicked shouting. The board had seen the email. So had the donors. Reginald stumbled back into his office, slamming the door. Through the glass, I saw him pacing, shouting into the phone, his face turning deep red. Every few seconds, he'd stop and stare at his computer screen like he couldn't believe what he was reading. By 9:30, 2 board members had called the front desk demanding an emergency meeting with him. By 9:35, a local journalist had replied to the email thread asking for comments about data manipulation inside Evergreen.
By 9:45, the whole building smelled like fear. I didn't hide. I stayed at my desk, writing out my final checklist, turning off my computer access, forwarding my work contacts to HR, and cleaning up my drawer. At one point, Carla slipped over and whispered, "Anita, what did you do?" I looked up, steady. The right thing. Her eyes widened. She looked half frightened, half impressed. Then she nodded once and whispered, "Good." Around 10, Reginald came out again, calmer, or at least pretending to be. His tie was loosened, his voice was controlled only by sheer pride. "Everyone back to work," he said sharply. "There has been a misunderstanding. The situation's under control." But no one believed him. He could feel it too. The air had changed. The same staff who used to avoid eye contact now watched him openly. The power he loved so much had slipped right out of his hands. I packed my personal things, one mug, a framed picture of my old field team, some plants. I slipped my ID badge off and placed it on my desk. When I walked toward the exit, Reginald stepped out from his office, blocking the hallway. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded. I looked him dead in the eye. "Home. My notice is over." He lowered his voice, full of false control. "You think this will protect you. The board will never believe." His phone rang again. It was the board chair. He stared down at the screen, jaw tight, then looked back at me. I raised an eyebrow. "Better answer that. Might be urgent." And I walked out. The whisper that followed me through the corridor was the sound of others realizing they didn't have to be afraid anymore. I thought maybe I'd collapse after that, maybe cry or feel guilty. But instead, that weekend, my world went beautifully quiet. I took long walks, turned off my phone, and listened to birds outside my window. I felt light. By Monday, my inbox was full, not from Evergreen, but from other organizations that had seen my name in the story, now spreading through the nonprofit community. A few journalists had written quick pieces titled, "Grant Officer Blows Whistle on Misuse of Environmental Funds." I wasn't named a hero or a villain, just a former coordinator who revealed evidence. Honestly, that was perfect.
Then came an email from the Regional Environmental Commission, the very agency that oversaw Evergreen's grants. The subject line, "Position opening, Director of Compliance." They wanted to talk. When I walked into that interview, still nervous, still unsure, I met an older woman named Dr. Lin, who looked at me kindly and said, "We need someone who understands both ethics and operations. Someone who isn't scared to say no when everyone else says yes. That someone might be you." By the end of the week, I was hired. 2 months later, Evergreen was under full investigation. The board quietly removed Reginald, calling it a leadership transition. But the staff all knew. One night, Carla texted me, "He's out. The auditors found everything. It's bad." She followed that with a simple "thank you." I smiled at my phone and typed back, "Stay honest. It's worth it." At my new job, I walked into clean offices with floor-to-ceiling windows and a coffee smell that didn't make me sick anymore. My title plate read, Director of Compliance, Environmental Oversight Unit. Every time I approved or rejected a project report, I thought about Evergreen. Now I wasn't the powerless one being told to fake numbers. I was the one who decided what counted as truth. But as months passed, something deeper came to my attention. Evergreen wasn't unique. The data manipulation I'd uncovered existed almost everywhere. Exaggerations, creative accounting, small lies that grew like weeds. Reginald had just been one gardener in a field of rot. One evening, as I went through more reports, I thought, stopping one man isn't enough. If I really wanted justice, I had to change the whole system that allowed people like him to thrive. So I started drafting an internal proposal tentatively titled the Conservation Accountability Initiative. The idea was simple: create an independent transparency program for all environmental NGOs that receive public or donor funding. Full audits, shared data dashboards, whistleblower protection, all mandatory. The more I wrote, the more it felt right. I spent nights fine-tuning outlines, case studies, potential outcomes. It was everything I'd once wished existed during my time at Evergreen. When I presented it to my new supervisors, they hesitated. "Anita, your idea's bold, but big players won't like it. You're asking them to expose their own weak points." "I know,"
I said softly. But if we don't do it, dishonesty wins again. They agreed to let me test the plan as a pilot program. News spread quickly across the industry. Some small groups supported it, others, the big, well-connected ones, wanted it dead. Guess who was suddenly back, working quietly as a consultant for one of those opposing groups? Reginald. When I saw his name on a memo, my heart skipped. He wasn't gone. He was just wearing a new mask. The next week we met face to face again at a regional conference. He approached me with that same smug half smile. Well, if it isn't Miss Morality herself. Enjoying the spotlight? I sipped my coffee calmly. Enjoying unemployment? Must be freeing. He chuckled, but I saw the hate flicker behind his eyes. Careful, Anita. Big ideas like yours make you enemies. I said, then I'll make sure they're the right ones. That face-off told me everything. My new fight wasn't against one man. It was against an entire network of people who thrived on hiding the truth. Revenge stories often end with a crash, a big moment of he got what he deserved. But real revenge, the kind that satisfies, is quieter. It's rebuilding something better in the place of what was broken. So I planned for a bigger fight. I teamed up with honest organizations, partnered with reporters, and began releasing small public reports about data transparency. Each one got attention. Each one tightened the screws on those who cheated. When an expose confirmed more cases of donor deception, public outrage pushed my initiative into action. Suddenly, people wanted accountability. And when the pressure mounted, the large groups that resisted, including Evergreen, had no choice but to join or lose funding altogether. Under scrutiny from every direction, all of Reginald's allies vanished like smoke. At last, months later, Evergreen's board reached out to me personally with an unbelievable proposal. Anita, we'd like you to return as executive director. I stared at the email for a long time, smiling slightly. Maybe in another life I'd have said yes, just to prove I'd won. But winning wasn't about sitting in their chair. It was about building a new table altogether. My reply was short. Thank you, but my work is here. Let's make the whole field better.
The day the reform went live, the world of environmental nonprofits took a collective, shaky breath. Websites updated overnight with new transparency dashboards. Press releases poured out, some hopeful, some defensive, some clearly terrified. Suddenly, the numbers everyone bragged about weren't whispers in grant reports anymore. They were public, checkable, undeniable. And the first to be checked? Evergreen. It started with a national investigative program that aired one rainy Tuesday evening. The screen lit up with side-by-side graphs, original grant data, and Evergreen's adjusted reports, all the same files I'd once sent quietly into the board's inbox. The host's voice was calm and sharp as a knife. For years, Evergreen claimed record success in their conservation projects, but internal data, now verified under the new Accountability Initiative, shows entire projects that never existed. Sources confirm the falsified reports were signed by a former executive, Reginald Harper. There he was. His photo flashed on screen, smiling like he used to, except now that smile looked hollow. Phones buzzed everywhere. Former staff texted me, "Turn on the TV." I watched from my apartment, a cup of tea in my hand, the steam rising slow. All I felt was relief. Not joy, not gloating, just deep, clean relief. The truth was finally louder than the lies. The next morning, my inbox flooded again, reporters wanting quotes, officials asking for statements. I stayed neutral. No personal comments, I replied to each. We're focusing on building standards that protect honesty. But one message stopped me cold. It was from Reginald himself.
Anita, you've made your point. I've lost everything. If you have any decency left, stop feeding this story. R. I read it twice, then typed back. I didn't feed the story. The truth did that on its own. I never heard from him again. Later I learned Evergreen's board had initiated legal action for misuse of funds and data fraud. His professional world just evaporated. The charming leader, who once silenced everyone, couldn't find a room willing to hear him anymore. Meanwhile, the initiative took off. The commission assigned a full team to expand it, and within a year, dozens of organizations signed on. Meetings were tense at first, some leaders defensive, others genuinely inspired. But over time, something shifted. People started sharing real data, even admitting mistakes without fear. Honesty became, strangely, contagious. At one conference, I ran into Kala again. She looked brighter, confident. "You wouldn't believe it," she told me. "Evergreen's new director actually listens. They publish everything now, mistakes too. It's different." I smiled. "Good. It's supposed to be." She hesitated, then said, "They still talk about you sometimes, the one who started the storm." I laughed softly. Storms clear the air. There were nights when I sat alone in the office after everyone else left, looking out over the city lights. I'd think about the girl who once typed reports for someone else's glory, too afraid to put her own name on her own work. I wanted to tell that version of me, "You were never naive. You were just honest." And that scared the wrong people. Sometimes revenge doesn't feel like fireworks. Sometimes it's as simple as walking into the place that once broke you and realizing no one here has the power to silence you anymore. A few months later, the initiative became law-backed policy across the region. My inbox filled every week with stories from whistleblowers thanking us for giving them a voice. One message stood out. "Hi Anita, I used to work under Reginald too. I remember the fear, the pressure, the fake smiles. Thank you for reminding me that good people don't have to stay quiet." I read it 3 times. That was the moment I finally let myself feel proud. At the official ceremony marking the program's full launch, Dr. Lin gave a short speech. Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's just one steady voice saying, "No more." Then she turned to me and smiled. And thanks to one steady voice, we all learned to listen. The audience applauded. I felt warmth in my chest, not for revenge, but for closure. Months later came that surreal email from Evergreen's board offering me the executive director position. Old me might have taken it, but I knew better now. Going back would make it personal again. The real win was staying above it, keeping the system clean. So, I thanked them politely and declined, closing the message with a smile. That night, I walked outside under quiet stars. The air felt lighter, open. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped in anyone's version of me. I wasn't the ghost behind someone else's success story. I was the author of my own. When people ask if I ever regretted sending that email, I tell them the truth. Yes, at first, because revenge is heavy when you're holding it alone. But when you use it to fix what's broken, it stops being revenge and becomes justice. I learnt that silence can either be a cage or a tool. Reginald used his silence to hide lies. I used mine to build something that could outlast both of us. And now, every time I approve a policy, I do it remembering that calm night when I whispered to my laptop, "You'll hear me finish." He and his kind heard me loud and clear. If you've ever been ignored, disrespected, or underestimated, remember quiet strength isn't weakness, it's preparation. Hit like, subscribe, and share this story with anyone who's still waiting for their moment to rise above. Because the best revenge isn't shouting louder. It's never needing to shout again.